Hey everybody, it's Matt from the house, and in this video, we're going to talk to you a little bit about fitting your skate shoes and how to make sure that they properly fit. So let's check these things out. All right, so most of us already know our shoe size, and most of the companies have got things pretty much nailed down, most of the shoes are pretty true to size, but it's not always 100% the same from shoe to shoe and even from style to style. A lot of times you'll think like, oh, you're trying a Nike shoe, and you'd be like, oh, I'm this size in a Nike, but I'm this size in a Etnies. But not necessarily, it could just be that shoe. Literally from shoe to shoe, you could actually be different. One of the great examples is in the Joslin and the Joslin Volk. Not only are these different models, but they're actually the same shoe, one with a Volk sole, one with a cup sole. And me, I'm actually a 10.5 in the Joslin, but I actually feel a little more comfortable in the 10 in the Joslin Volk. And my shoe size is traditionally a 10.5. But it can make a difference, from shoe to shoe. Basically, you want that shoe to fit snug. You don't want your foot moving around inside the shoe, especially when you're skateboarding. You don't want to buy shoes with extra room to grow in, if your foot is growing, because it's definitely a big thing, especially with kids, and I've got a daughter myself, and you always want to make sure those shoes last as long as possible. But with skate shoes, you're going to burn through them before you outgrow them. So if you do have a foot that is growing, don't buy the shoe with extra room to grow in, just because it's not going to benefit you at all. Just because, again, you're going to tear that shoe apart and destroy it and need a new pair of shoes, unless you have a crazy growth spurt. Right off the bat, you want that shoe to fit a little, nice and snug. How you try it on brand new, that's the tightest it's ever gonna be. They're only gonna stretch out from there. Shoes mostly do their stretching here on the sides, but your foot does settle down into it a little bit, and you do gain just a tiny little bit off of the front as your foot settles into the shoe, and the insole and the midsole of the shoe start to wear down. But pop your foot in there, make sure that it fits snug. Toes, I like my toes touching in the front, and off the front a little is okay too. But you don't want it too far off the front of the shoe, because one, you lose board feel, especially when you're starting to do flip tricks. But also when your foot doesn't sits back a little too far off the front of the shoe, every time you land, your foot can actually jam into the front and kind of hit the front of the shoe. Whereas if it's right up against the front, if you kick something really hard and jam your toe, you're going to do that no matter what. But if you just randomly hit things here and there like this, that force is going to go into the sole of the shoe, not so much into your toe, just because as long as you've got your shoe laced up nice and snug, your foot's not moving anywhere, so it's not going to hit the front of the shoe. So again, a little bit of room is okay, but me, I always get it so my toes are touching in the front, just because I know the shoe's going to stretch out and it's going to get a little bit bigger. But again, it's personal preference, and the shoe's got to fit your foot properly. So right off the bat, when you do get a shoe, obviously, I'm a 10.5, so that's always the first thing I look at is 10.5. And it's always the way, one of the best ways to go is once you figure out you're at 10.5, start there. Obviously, when you're buying online, it can be a little bit harder, but most of the companies are pretty true to size, so good place to start. And then also too, widths of shoes too. If you do have a wider foot, not a lot of skate shoes actually come in an actual width. Some of them do have wider toe boxes versus narrower toe boxes. So that can be a big difference. If you find that a shoe is a little too narrow, that's another thing too, is switch shoes. Don't go up a half size, because then you're going to run into, again, fitting issues in the length of the shoe. And that brings me to the next point, is that sometimes shoes just don't fit. So me, for instance, I tried on this Shane O'Neill shoe. Awesome shoe, but for me, it's not too narrow. It's actually, there's not enough material here. So when it comes to width on the shoe, yeah, shoes can be too narrow for your foot, but if it just feels tight over the top of your foot, that doesn't mean mean that the shoe's too narrow. It means that there's not enough material cut here. Why I bring that up is you'll actually notice that, you know, some shoes companies use the same sole on multiple shoes, and depending on how much material is cut here depends on if it's too tight or not. So if you do feel that pressure on the top of your foot, not on the sides of your foot, it's not that the sole of the shoe is actually too narrow for you, it's that there's not enough material cut across the top here. So again, don't assume that just because a shoe feels really tight here that it's too narrow for you, and don't assume that every single shoe with that exact same outsole is not going to fit you. It actually depends on how much material is cut across the top. And then, like I said, I tried this on in a 10.5. The length was fine, just way too tight across here. I'm not gonna go up a half size and gain room in the shoe where I don't need it and not gonna be able to feel my board. So it's just one of those things where it's an awesome shoe because of how high my arch, I don't have a super high arch, but because I have a little bit taller arch, this is gonna fit, you know, people with a little bit flatter feet a little bit better. I'm just not gonna be able to skate this shoe, but I'll try out some of the other Nike shoes for sure. All right, so obviously if you're buying online, it's kind of hard to, you know, shop for a shoe, you know, without being able to try it on. But there is a way that you can actually measure your foot at home and, you know, figure it out if you're not sure exactly what size shoe you are. And this is the big thing too, as you know, as you're a kid and you start to grow, once you get to, you know, your teenage years, at some point your foot stops growing. And I've seen this happen multiple times where I had one of my friends come in and he was a lot smaller than me, and he came in and just said, hey, I need a 10.5. And I'm like, there's no way you have the exact same size foot as me. And he said to me, I just always bought shoes a half size bigger because that's what my mom told me to do. And it is, it's one of those things where you as you're growing, you look at your shoe and you're like, oh, I'm a 9, these are too tight, let me get a 9.5. And you get in that habit of buying shoes a half size bigger, but it gets to a point where your foot stops growing. And at that point, you have to realize that my foot has stopped growing and I need to stop buying shoes a half size too big. So again, if you need to measure your foot at home, it's a pretty easy thing you can do. All you're gonna need is a piece of paper, a tape measure, or a ruler, and a wall. So basically what you're gonna do is you're gonna take your foot, you're gonna set it against the wall. You're also gonna take that piece of paper and you're gonna set it against the wall. And then while it's at the wall, you're gonna put your foot on it, and you might need to get, if you've got a bigger foot, you might need to get two pieces of paper, maybe tape them together, but make sure that wall is flat. It doesn't have to be a wall, it could be anything that goes flat to the ground. Make sure that there isn't like some molding or something on the side of the wall. But again, put that right against the wall, set your foot on it, put your heel all the way against your wall, and then make a little mark right in front of your toe, and make it as close to the front of your toe as you can, just with a marker. And then you're gonna take out your tape measure, your ruler, and you are going to measure from the back of the paper right to that mark on your toe. So I did this one earlier, and when I measure this, it comes out to not quite 11, just under 11. We're talking about like 10.8, 10.9. And then if you look at most of the shoe charts, you'll see that that matches up with a size 10.5 shoe. So the other thing you can do too is if you use centimeters, that can be a little bit more accurate. But again, whatever works for you, you can check the size charts on our every single shoe on that page. So if you're not 100% sure exactly what size shoe you are, that's a great way to, you know, measure it and check it out. Okay, another thing to kind of look at too is when you look at kids' shoes too. A lot of the kids' shoes, if you're buying for your son or daughter, the kids' shoes kind of run right in line with men's shoes with sizing. So they start off with toddler sizes, they go up to around a 10. At that 10, some companies consider a 10 a toddler size, some consider it a kid size, and then you go 10, 11, 12, 13, and then it starts at 1. And then once you go 1 up to like the 5 to 7 range, there's an overlap in the men's shoes, but essentially a kid's 7 is the same thing as a men's 7. But when you get to women's shoes, it's actually a size and a half difference. So a lot of the companies are starting to build shoes a little bit more of like a unisex. You know, instead of having just a specific women's, you know, shoe, they'll give you unisex sizing. And again, it's going to be a size and a half difference. So right off the bat, this Etnies size 10 in this Jocelyn Volk. This is gonna go up a size and a half to women. So this is going to be 11 and a half women's shoes. So likewise, if you want to go the other way from a women's shoe to a men's shoe, that's kind of how the sizing goes. Generally, the women's specific shoes do tend to be a little bit narrower, but again, it just depends on your foot and how it's shaped. But again, if you are, you know, a girl and you like one of the guys' shoes, one of the, you know, specific shoes, just figure out that your size, if you're a women's 9, you're gonna actually go down a size and a half, so you're gonna go to a 7.5. All right, thanks for checking out our video on how to size and fit your skate shoes properly. You know, like we said, get them so they're snug, not uncomfortably snug, but snug, because these things are gonna stretch out. You know, good things to know too is Volk shoes, they're gonna stretch out a little bit more than a cup-soled shoe is, especially in the sole area. But again, how these shoes fit right out of the box, it's the tightest they're ever gonna be. So make sure that, you know, you do get a shoe that fits your foot right, because the more your foot moves around inside the shoe, that's basically foot fatigue that you're gonna have throughout the day. Your feet get tired and achy. If you wanna be out skating, you don't want your feet getting tired. You don't want them to, you know, wanna be able to skate as long as you can for that day. But if you have any questions about these shoes or any of the shoes at thehouse.com, leave us some comments down below. We're on there every single day. We wanna answer your questions. We wanna definitely get you into a super good pair of shoes, but we want to make sure those shoes fit you properly too, so you can have them on your feet all day and not feel like you have to take them off. Make sure to like and subscribe and get that bell on too, so you can find out when all the new videos drop. And yeah, no matter what shape your foot is, get yourself a good pair of shoes and get out and skate, because any day of riding is a good day of riding.